Hello, I'm Chris Hartwell, and welcome to The Heartbeat, the place where I talk about just a few of the things that make this little guy tick. Today, I'm going to be talking about Ilya Naishuller's Hardcore Henry. Join me, won't you? In Hardcore Henry, we are introduced to Henry, or given the first-person perspective, we're introduced to ourselves as we wake up, unable to recall where or who we are. In the first few seconds of the film, though, our rather scientific wife explains to us that we recently suffered an accident and are now more machine than man. The upside, the procedure has certainly heightened our strength, stamina, and resilience. The downside, moments after learning that, the rather evil Aiken shows up, kidnaps our scientific wife, and forces us on a revenge-fueled killing rampage. Now, I would assume by now that most of you guys have seen this trailer and realize that unlike the forthcoming Warcraft or Assassin's Creed where the video games are trying to look like movies, Hardcore Henry is a movie trying to look like a video game, never once leaving that first-person perspective. Now, obviously films like Doom have in sequences utilized this style, and I know there are a few other obscure films out there that have taken this approach, but for most of us, this is our first time experience watching an entire feature film where everything's experienced through the eyes of the protagonist. And as such, it's logical just to ask, did it work at all? And more specifically, was this actually a movie or just one giant gimmick? Well, let's start by talking about a few of the positives and a few of the things that did work. Walking out of the theater, I did feel like I had experienced more than one just long, giant GoPro montage, which I do love, by the way. I've spent far too much time on YouTube watching crazy GoPro sport videos. Nonetheless, when I actually shell out the money to go to the theaters or invest 2+ hours of my life into a film, I do expect something a bit more. And this film, to its defense, I thought did give me something more. I'm not saying that the story is anything profound. In fact, it kind of is just one big excuse to hang all this crazy action and mayhem on. Even so, though, as the story kicked off, I did find that the filmmakers were effectively constructing a series of events that did more than simply allow me to physically see through Henry's eyes, but emotionally see through them as well. Because we were both reeling from these sudden, violent attacks, and were together confused by the recurring appearances from Sharlto Copley, who never seems to be quite the same person each time he shows up. And for those first 20 minutes or so, I did experience kind of this unique, interesting connection with the title character. And also, and I may be one of the only individuals out there like this, though I'm not much of a gamer myself, aside from that one semester that I spent completely enslaved to oblivion, I do actually enjoy watching my friends play video games, and watching Hardcore Henry, it became readily apparent that this director certainly had an understanding of how a lot of video games are structured, especially when it comes to first-person shooters, from GoldenEye to Perfect Dark, to Halo, to Call of Duty, to Half-Life. There's always an escalation as each level becomes more complicated and more challenging. And on this film, when it came to things like the locations, the weapons, the number of combatants, the vehicles, the amount of blood, things certainly escalated. And when I looked at individual shots in any of those given sequences, I did often find myself thinking, okay, this director and cinematographer do know how to handle this specific type of photography, and can, if they so desire, construct it in a way that is palatable and that we can actually track with. So, for example, in one sequence, they took the time to firmly set the geography by going through the same distinct environment more than once. Or in another sequence, they had us tail a runner who navigated the exact same terrain that we would moments later. Or in another, they simply staged the impacts, explosions, and bullet hits further away from camera. And all of that was done so that we had the time to see and process, and consequently enjoy, all that was happening in front of us. Now, obviously one thing that we didn't see much of was Henry himself, but we were treated to Sharlto Copley, though, who, as he customarily does, chewed right through the scenery, which, for this film, worked just fine and was rather enjoyable. And I thought, too, that the villainous Aiken was able to find a certain level of creepiness as he aimed for something halfway between the main character of A Clockwork Orange and the Rainmaker from Looper. And in all of this, both in the action and in the acting, I also sensed just an understanding from the director that, especially in this piece, if they didn't every once in a while stop and let the audience breathe, it would be just far too much to handle. And in my opinion, that understanding actually led to the best sequence of the film, which I won't spoil, but let's just say that it involves a little bit of singing. With that said, though, at the end of the day, what this film primarily is an action film. And like I mentioned already, my personal engagement with action really comes from my ability to process two things: the what and the why. So first, can I process what is happening on screen? And so much of the reason why I dislike so many action films today is I genuinely have no clue what's going on screen. And even if I do, it's not captured in any sort of impactful way, which really does make me feel bad for all those choreographers and stunt performers. All of that brilliant action just gone to waste. And that really was the case on this film. Apart from the aforementioned moments, so much of it felt like one missed impact after the other, oftentimes quite literally. I wouldn't process a punch until the person I'd punched had been knocked a couple feet away from me and I was actually able to see them. And second, can I process why what's happening on screen is happening? And really, this has to do with my emotional investment in the film. And in that regard, unfortunately, much of Hardcore Henry felt a bit like running around the world of Grand Theft Auto, but not on any specific mission. Yes, there were a few moments where the objective was clear, but more often than not, it did just kind of feel like we were jumping from one obligatory action sequence to the next. And to make things more difficult, throughout this film, I became more and more unsure how confused I should or shouldn't be when it came to that why. Just not being able to see the protagonist so often left me in the dark, as I was unable to perceive whether we were on the same page intellectually or emotionally. And that would be okay if I could look at the character and see that they were just as lost or as confused as myself, because then I could rest assured that as they journey back to the light of understanding and knowledge, I would too with them. And obviously I didn't have that on this film, but that wasn't the only thing that the singular point of view took away from me. It also stripped away variety. And when it comes to a wall-to-wall action film like this, you really need to vary more than just the locations, combatants, and weapons to keep the action from becoming white noise. You really need a visual escalation as well, which is why I found a film like Mad Max Fury Road so excellent. It too was essentially a 2-hour action sequence, but in contrast with its visuals, it seamlessly slid from wide to close to fast to slow to light to dark. On this film, though, when it came to varying the visuals, they really didn't give us much more than a few teasing slow motion or sniper rifle shots just to briefly mix things up. Now, to close things out, like I mentioned earlier, I do kind of receive an odd enjoyment in watching my friends play video games, but my enjoyment really doesn't necessarily come from watching such stellar gamer with skill and precision land the perfect grind on Tony Hawk Pro Skater. It's the fact that I'm watching my friend land the perfect grind on Tony Hawk Pro Skater. I'm watching their life meter get lower and lower, watching their time clock tick down, 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 or watching them triumph and throw down the big boss. It's just fun watching them receive that mission and accomplish it. And it's that personal connection, that genuine investment that I never really received towards Henry on Hardcore Henry. All this to say, I will give Hardcore Henry a 2.5 out of 5. This is a very divisive film. People seem to either love it or hate it, and I would love to know what you guys thought of the film, so comment below and let me know. Would you prefer to see more of these kind of singular point of views kind of continue to come out, or is it kind of a one and done for you? Definitely comment below and let me know. Also, please do subscribe. I'm going to continue to review films and television on this channel, and I would love for you all to stay up to date on all of those things. But for now, I'm Chris Hartwell. This is The Heartbeat. Thank you for joining me.